Hello. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Tabio Gesese, and I'll be in the background answering any of your technical questions today. Before we begin, I'd like to give you a brief overview of your webinar console. To ask any questions, go to the Q&A panel at the lower right side of your screen. Type your question, select all panelists from the drop-down menu, then click Send. If you do not see the Q&A panel, go to the bottom of your screen, select the icon with the three dots, then choose Q&A. We encourage you to submit questions throughout the session. To preserve confidentiality, questions will be read by our team and will not be attributed to you. We will do our best to get to all the questions during the Q&A portion. But if we are not able to get an answer for you today, we will follow up via email. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speakers today. Scott.
Hello.
Viberg. Good afternoon, Viberg.
Good afternoon.
And our host, Renee. Thank you. Renee.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks for the introduction, and a warm welcome also from my side to our next level of logistics and transportation. I'm Renee. I'm an engagement manager from the Cologne office and purely focusing on procurement and transformation. And Scott, maybe you want to introduce yourself next.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Scott McConnell. I'm a partner based out of Chicago, and I lead Mckinsey's procurement practice for transportation and logistics clients in North America. Look forward to talking with you all today.
Then I will continue. Good afternoon. I'm Wigbert Böhm. I'm a partner based out of Munich. I spend my time exclusively in transportation and logistics, and I do a lot of cost optimization and procurement programs, and I lead our practice for operations for transportation and logistics companies in Europe.
Perfect. Thank you. So as I said before, today we want to talk about specific industry challenges for logistics and transportation companies, how COVID impacted these companies and increased pressure on procurement, and of course, how we can overcome these challenges with emerging topics across several digital levers. And let's start. Scott, maybe you can take over.
Yep. So we'll talk about this in two sections today. First, I'll share a bit about what we're seeing in transportation and logistics, both in general as it relates to COVID and then digital solutions. And Wigbert's going to talk through some of the new tools and approaches that we're seeing our clients use on a regular basis. So logistics and transportation has historically been a challenging place for procurement. Our research across industries has showed that logistics and transportation generally lags behind others in procurement. And we'd say that there are a number of reasons that underlie this. Some of them are industry related, so a very fragmented global supplier landscape. And for a number of categories, this means very small batch sizes that we engage with these suppliers on, and the frequent number of conversations and negotiations tends to mean we're not able to get to the depth and the rigor of analytics that industries with more consolidated categories or consolidated supply bases are able to get to. And then there are also some categories where there's an oligopolistic market structure. So think aircraft, vehicle fleet OEMs, and rail, sticks of rail or ties, very over-consolidated market structure, which make it difficult to get leverage. Right? And in that context, there are some cultural and structural things within a procurement organization in transportation and logistics that makes it difficult for those organizations to be as effective as possible. Oftentimes, the decision-making for buying and procurement is decentralized for a lot of categories. These are distributed network operations, and the decision makers are out in the field, right? So they're the ones that build the supplier relationships and make those decisions. But because they're out in the field, they don't spend their time in a standardized, data-driven mindset and approach towards supplier management. So that means every supplier engagement tends to be different. It's hard to consistently manage those suppliers in a regular way. And it's difficult to do so with an analytical baseline, and not just because of what that frontline decision maker is doing, but the data quality is oftentimes very difficult. With data spread across sometimes dozens of ERPs, it's very challenging for transportation clients to aggregate that in one place and then build a data fact base that ties to the G&L. And then it makes it a very manual and transactional body of work to do analytics when it is time for a major negotiation. And oftentimes what happens is not just the front end of the negotiation, but also once the conversation starts, it becomes very difficult to run analysis and understand the supplier bids as they come back for complicated categories. I think if you're buying freight transportation, to understand the scenario analysis in a manual way without digital tools is very tough. And then all of this leaves procurement teams focused on oftentimes accounts payable, processing invoices, very tactical work, and it misses an opportunity to elevate their stature in the organization to be peers and thought partners with the business, and therefore organizations don't invest in capability building. And so it's just this detrimental flywheel where procurement teams don't have the opportunity or the training to step up and be business partners. And so therefore they're never thought of that way. And that cycle continues. We see digital and analytical tools, though, especially progress in the last few years, really turning the corner and offering transportation and logistics clients a chance to step up and become more effective. And we'll talk through in detail a few of these examples today, but there are some around steering and guiding the organization. We're never going to get to a place in our industry where procurement is fully centralized. It just doesn't make sense for the business and the operation. But there are ways to take digital and analytical tools and enable those closer to the frontline decision makers to make better and more consistent decisions, right? So it's almost as if it was a centralized process. And that's done through standard analyses and centralized spend intelligence and repositories so that everyone is singing from the same song sheet and has the same data set. There's also ways to do it through automation to minimize the manual effort and the analysis to interact and engage with suppliers. So we'll talk through a few supplier management, supplier engagement tools. And then finally, in capabilities, taking training from the classroom and doing it in a very digitally enabled, bite-sized way, which is frankly the way adults learn best, to get information just in time when they need it and the medium and platform that they need it. And so that's really come a long way as well, and we've seen that have a big impact. Now, I'd be remiss to not mention the impact COVID has had on this journey a lot of transportation and logistics clients have been on. A ton of challenges we've seen in this space in the last few months. Certainly, supply chain availability and resiliency has become a major theme. And I've seen a lot of clients take an approach of being very cautious about preserving that supply chain and ensuring stability and resiliency of suppliers, which is absolutely critical, and especially in certain categories. I have an airline client where so many of their very critical functions and suppliers are reliant on the airline industry, which is down 80-90%, right? So it's very important to them to stay close to those suppliers through this time. But there are chances and opportunities through this as well, right? So not every category follows that mold. There are some categories where industries and companies are doing quite well, and there is opportunity to engage in a more strategic renegotiation to drive cost savings. And it's important the suppliers that are doing well over the last 6 months are taking both the challenges and the chances at the same time and not pulling back and saying, I'm going to wait for this to pass before I re-begin my value generation journey. So why don't we at this point, Wigbert, I'll pass to you and you can talk through some of the examples of digital tools. If you're on mute, Wigbert.
I hope you can hear me now. So essentially, Scott talked you through a little bit through the landscape that we are seeing in transportation and logistics, where a lot of the decision making is centralized. there is a lot of inconsistency and lack of data. And now we essentially see two different ways how analytical and digital approaches can actually help to improve procurement. So one is through increasing insight generation and thereby in a fact-based manner supporting commercial negotiations and leading to better results. And secondly, automating and digitalizing processes that used to be manual, which help in two different ways. One is, of course, to give more time to the buyer, to the procurement person to do value-adding activities, but also, secondly, to help them do analysis that they would not be able to do otherwise. And I will just now go through a few examples to bring this to light. So the first set of tools is spend intelligence tools that give you instant transparency on, the key or basic insights that you need to run a procurement organization. For example, the spend by category, by supplier, maverick buying, the use of frame contracts versus spot buying, cash discount, volume rebates. I would say the basics, the one-on-one. The interesting thing is that by leveraging what I would call the one-on-one on transparency, spend transparency, you can already create significant impact. So one example includes a client of mine that implemented spend transparency for the first time, and therefore the first time got transparency on the spend of their daughter companies and their sub-subsidiaries, which actually helped them to leverage their frame contracts and really fully get access to the volume discounts they were entitled to. Another example includes an airline client of mine that has been struggling quite a bit in the context of COVID and has been ramping down operations. And they used tools like that to actually manage down their discretionary spend in the COVID time and also to manage cash on a daily basis. So next to the one-on-one on basic transparency, there is also a lot of stuff that you can actually do in terms of analyses that have or used to require a procurement expert to actually run these, to actually provide those insights or analysis to actually the people in the field. So one example is linear performance pricing. So essentially, if you're not familiar with this type of analysis, it's kind of an internal benchmark on how much you pay on a certain item per cost driver. So for example, on trucking or rail, you could compare different O&D pairs by kilometer, and you probably see quite a bit of deviations. So it's not really a very difficult analysis, but given the decentral nature of procurement in transportation and logistics companies, we only, in many instances, or most of my clients at least, they would only have this capability available in the headquarter, in the central procurement function, but not in the field. And by actually bringing a tool that actually can do this, even the people in the field can actually run this analysis and actually use the insight by pressing a button for their taking better procurement decisions. So another example on the next page includes what we call clean sheet analysis. So this is essentially a bottom-up analysis of should cost, for example, for a call center, for ground handling, for example, or for terminals if you are in the shipping industry. And again, here you would require a procurement specialist that really understands the category to being able to build up such a model. And to make things even worse, you would also need to update the input data, the factor cost, for example, on a regular basis, which of course people in the field would not be able, typically not be able to do. So, for example, one of my clients actually implemented an automated clean sheet solution to actually assess the fair cost of trucking in the Americas. And not only they had the model, which then could actually be accessed by everyone in the procurement organization, but they would also automatically feed in an update on regular basis the input factors that would change, for example, the road tolls, the driver wages, or the cost of fuel, which of course then helps them to assess a fair price and assess different offers and get much more leverage in negotiations, which help them in this case actually to get to significant improvements despite tied up markets, for example, in Mexico or in the US over the last few years. Actually quite a success. The last example on what I would call the insight generation tools is price crawlers, which is actually quite interesting. So it's essentially tools that crawl the web for prices. And of course, it works much better for some categories than others. So this is an example for prices for hotel rooms. And what these crawlers would actually do is go through the web and on all websites that are offering hotel prices, actually look for the cheapest available offer for a certain hotel room or for a certain date. And this, of course, helps a lot to, strengthen the procurement person when negotiating with hotel groups. But it can also automatically lead for savings. For example, some procurement organizations agree with hotel organizations on a certain price that is actually going up and down depending on the market rate. So, for example, they offer, based on volume discount, a best price that is 30% lower on the best available price in the marketplace. So essentially, using these price crawler tools can immediately lead to what I would call automatic savings with little manual work. So that concludes the examples for the first set of tools that you can use for insight generation. So let's now turn to the second set of tools on that actually help to automate or to digitalize the procurement process. So the first example is that we wanted to highlight is digital procurement tools that essentially do the tender and procurement process in a tool and take away a lot of administrative work from the procurement or buying person. So the interesting thing in my mind is not only that it is possible, to kind of automate some of the work that used to be done manually and free up capacity for more value-adding activities in procurement, but you can also use these tools to do things that would not be able, that previously would not be able to do, especially if you have a large amount of SKU status or items that you are tendering. So, for example, I was actually supporting a client on a trucking tender in the US where they were actually procuring logistics or trucking services for almost $500 million US. And what we actually did is we tendered roughly 10,000 origin and destination pairs separately with several hundred suppliers and asked for different quotes for each of the lanes. And of course, manually, you would not have been able to actually do this and to also get meaning into all of that. And also to make things even more complicated, there are certain restrictions, for example, certain truckers that can only give you so much capacity or want to give you so much capacity or you would not want to allocate more than a certain percentage on a lane to a certain to a single tracking company. So also running this optimization algorithm is not possible, in my view, in a manual way. And essentially having these tools then ultimately also leads to additional savings on this example. And it was actually in 2018 or 19 when the market was actually still very tough in the US, where we actually helped them to get to like roughly 10% savings on their tracking spend. So quite a significant savings that have been enabled by leveraging such tools.
Yeah, Wigbert, if I could just build on that with an example of a client in mine in the U.S. It's a bus client, and they struggle to drive meaningful savings in some categories such as their vehicle parts, MROs, and freight transportation, where it's a massive supply base with a huge number of SKUs, tens of thousands of different SKUs. And they would just vapor lock when it came time to do anything more than a 2 or 3 supplier scenario, right? When you do it in Excel, it's just very tough to get to the level of nuance Wigbert is describing. And introducing this type of advanced sourcing RFX tool was a game changer for them, right? And it didn't require a multi-year implementation. It was these tools can be available in a targeted off-the-shelf model to at least test it and see if it works and see if it sticks within the kind of working model of your teams. And then it had a massive impact, and they ended up keeping the tool and implementing it across other categories as well.
So thank you for that. Maybe another example, if you can move to the next page, please, Scott, includes Amazon-like catalogs. And this is not just a fancy thing, but it really helps organizations to actually drive buying behavior, and also helps to significantly decrease maverick buying, which is important for procurement decisions are really made in the field. So this, for example, is the railway example, and I think it also applies, for example, to shipping, where spare parts are being ordered where and when they are needed. And of course, traditionally, this was just someone in the field calling some supplier to actually getting some spare parts. And of course, this has been historically very difficult to actually optimize the spend across those categories. And by introducing these catalogs, people that are looking for spare parts or other things, they can just look into the catalog, order directly, and this then allows the procurement organization to actually drive savings also in these categories that used to be more difficult. So in this case, in this rail example case that I'm referring to, the interesting thing is that not only the savings, the commercial savings from procurement have been significant, but it also, introducing a catalog like that helped actually to create transparency on the stock levels in the decentral depots. And it was, despite significant commercial savings, reducing inventory in this case was enabled by introducing those catalogs, was even the bigger lever for this client. Then let's maybe go to the last example. Of course, if you are running a decentral procurement organization, then of course the question is a little bit how to actually get order into all of that, how to actually manage priorities in that organization. And there's just like 2 examples and 2 ideas of how organizations have started to do this. So the left-hand side is an example of a dashboard that several clients of us are using, where the CPO can actually get, by pressing a button, instant visibility on what the decentral procurement organizations in the field are doing and what the status of the negotiations is in one click. And to complement this, some organizations have also started to actually build online tutorials and introduced standards which are made available to the procurement organization also digitally.
Wigbert, one that I'd add here is a client of mine. I had a railroad client in the U.S., and there were a number of categories that it was local maintenance of way, road masters, folks in the field were making negotiations and buying decisions. And it wasn't the right decision to centralize it, but what we did was build a digital workflow. We called it a negotiation factory, right? And we were able to bring together supply market analysis, historical facts and figures around what's being paid, what's been paid previously, but also what's being paid elsewhere in the country, and have the local buyers go through a standard process online and see the analysis. And it was great because it enabled them to bring the best of the central procurement team to their supplier engagements, which they want to do, right? They want to get to the best savings, but they don't feel often empowered to do so or enabled to do so. And so that negotiation factory enabled them to drive savings without the need of upskilling and enforcing a central procurement team on them, and we found it very impactful.
So now, how do we put all of this together? If you can go to the next page, Scott. So, I mean, the interesting thing about all of this is that, of course, you can just buy some or many of the tools that we just highlighted in the marketplace. But of course, it's not going to get you to create a procurement organization. So how do you actually get meaning and sense in all of that? And what we actually believe is that in order to actually make this a quantum leap or next leap of performance in procurement, leveraging the digital or analytical possibilities, you need to run a procurement transformation that really focuses on capability building in the entire organization, including the headquarter or the central procurement function, and also the procurement people in the field. There's actually quite a few learnings or success factors from running such transformations. I think we talked about the strong emphasis on capability building and learning by doing. Of course, what we typically aim for is to create savings immediately, because I mean, there is, of course, no point in just building capabilities with no impact, and doing this in parallel, of course, enables significant savings directly. And it's also super helpful to actually create excitement and mobilize in the organization and mobilize the organization. If you have some lighthouses that actually show the success and create the eagerness to do more. And lastly, if you, of course, want to drive the usage of some of those tools, what is typically helpful is to have kind of a rough idea of what the target picture should look like, and architect a program, which of course you can take in small chunks or slices. But what you should have in mind is a bit the architecture on how we actually want to get to the target picture. And with that, we have reached the end of the presentation, but there have been a few questions, and I think the first question that we got directly refers to how we are thinking about a procurement transformation, which is essentially what you do if you want to apply the digital procurement if the organization is already on its journey for some time on digitalization in general. And maybe, Scott, you want to take that question?
Yes, gladly. And before I do, just to reiterate, the Q&A panel in the bottom right, please do open it up and type your questions in there, and we'll take them as they come. So I'll read the question. It's a great one. It's, how do you move the needle in logistics category management in the interim while your organization is on its 3 to 5 year journey to digitization? It's a great question. We encounter it all the time. I would say that the worst thing our clients can do is nothing, right? Is to say, let's sit and wait. We have a large ERP that's going to come in a few years and solve all of the problems for a few reasons. First, and most importantly, is because simply digitizing a process, if it's not already optimal today, doesn't add value, and in often cases can add frustration to an organization that has gone through this journey and is not feeling the tool working for them the way that it should. So there's a few different ways that organizations can get started in the midst of an ERP transformation. One of them is working on the health of their procurement organization. So do you have the right category management structure? Do your category managers have robust and detailed supply market understandings? Are they already doing clean sheets to understand the should cost for the categories that they're buying today? And do they already have sound business partnerships with their business partners out in the field? All of those things should be in place before digitization is complete. And most clients, especially in transportation logistics, have some work to do in this space. And so what I tell a lot of clients is to take advantage of the fact that your company is investing in this massive 3 to 5 year journey to digitize, and say, in order to stick the landing and make this impactful, we need to invest today on our business partnerships and on our market strategies and clean sheets and these capabilities that need to happen anyways. And then with that, that's a health aspect. There's also a performance aspect, right? As I see my clients go through that journey, and while they wait to digitize, they tie up some of their processes. It makes sense to go to market, engage suppliers, and do a wave or two of value generation, because it's a common tempo to do that on a 1 to 2, 3 year basis anyways. And so if you're on a 3 to 5 year digitization journey, you should do a round of value capture while that journey is underway. And then it's on the subsequent round that everything is integrated into the new tool. Wigbert, feel free to pile on any additional thoughts you have if you do.
I was actually trying to think about this while you were speaking, because the next question is actually piling on quite nicely. The question is, what is the first thing I should actually do? I can't do all of this at the same time. And that's true. I would say, I would actually like to echo what you said, Scott. I think you need to be pragmatic and start somewhere. Of course, not completely random, but what I see at different clients is that the context is very different and the needs are very different. So, for example, I have one client where spend transparency is a big issue, and of course they have quite a clear target picture in mind in including leveraging procurement analytics and all the fancy things that you can do. But they have probably rightfully so decided to actually implement spend transparency solution to actually get some basic improvements going, and then they will probably be on the journey and add on additional capabilities. I have another client where I think the answer was different or is different. So they were actually struggling the most with limited procurement capabilities in the field. As a global organization where they have 2 to 3 or 4 people, procurement people in each country, and they are in probably 150 countries. And of course, there is a lot of spend that needs to be procured locally. And what they have embarked on is essentially a journey to build the capabilities with the local people by also leveraging the digital tools and providing them with some basic or more advanced analysis by pressing a button, which was their way of driving the performance in the procurement organization to the next level.
Thanks, Wigbert. One other question that came in here. how do you drive impact with digital tools like these in an organization that is fragmented? I'm happy to take a first swing at answering this. It's a very common scenario where our procurement teams in transportation and logistics aren't very big. They may not have a ton of spend under their control. And so some of these tools can seem very daunting, like it's like we don't have the budget, the time, the know-how to implement something so big and broad. And I would say while some of these tools do require a heavy lift to get underway, proper spend intelligence could require stitching together a ton of ERPs. Like there is some muscle required. A lot of these tools don't and can be implemented in a specific category or two where you have a great category manager in place, a good relationship or potentially a good relationship with the business. And whether it's bringing in clean sheeting or an ERFX solution, advanced sourcing analytics, a lot of these can be category specific, not a heavy lift. And what I see clients do is use those to have an early win if what you're trying to do is build a stronger profile and relationship with the business, is to start in one place with one of these not at scale tools. Finally, it looks like we have one here around impact. What do you typically see as the impact from an effort like this? Wigbert, do you want to take that first?
Yeah, of course. There's the classical consulting answer, which is it depends, and it depends probably on the starting point, how mature the organization already is. It also depends a little bit on the categories that you're looking into. So maybe getting to significant savings in the US in trucking in 2018 wasn't potentially the greatest time, but still there could have been significant impact in just securing capacity. But having said all of that, in my experience in transportation and logistics, the impact that we see is probably between 5 to 10% on the baseline for the more, industry, the categories that you find in the industry. Industries that can be actually quite significant. And I would actually assume that in these times, the impact that you can expect could be even bigger, leveraging the opportunities that are currently out in the market.
Thanks, Wigbert. All right, everyone. Well, that concludes our webinar today on procurement, logistics, and transportation. Thank you all for joining, and feel free to follow up if you have any further questions. Have a good day.